From the Oklahoman Newsroom, this is an OU update. This is actually our extended look at OU basketball for the week. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell and OU beat writer Ryan Aber. Guys, Oklahoma getting ready to head to Iowa State this weekend. And Ryan, I don't think the Sooners can have a road game without us reflecting on the fact that they have not been good on the road. I mean, we saw them win some great road games in the non-conference, but since conference play has started, it's been a real struggle. Are you able to put your finger on what you think the biggest difference is in this team when they go on the road?
Well, the biggest difference has to be Brady Manick and his ability to hit threes. He's shooting approximately 60% from behind the three-point line at Lloyd Noble Center. On the road, in true road environments, he's shooting about 25%, or actually it's right at 25%. And when you don't have that, that makes it so much more difficult for their offense to function because they're so reliant on those drive and kick threes from Trae Young to Brady Manick in the corner. He likes to find Christian James out there too. Christian James hasn't shot as well on the road as he has at home, but there's not that vast disparity like there is with Manick, who's frustrated by it. I talked to him after the game that they lost last week at Texas, and he just says, I don't know, it's just shots aren't falling. I feel good. They're just not finding a hole, and that's just something I think he's just going to have to figure out a way to hit a couple, and then maybe that confidence starts coming back.
Barry, is this a situation where we have to remind ourselves that as important as Brady Manick has been, he is a freshman? I mean, Trae Young sort of skews our thought process on what a freshman can do and may, be able to do. Is that the situation here, or what do you chalk it up to with Brady Manick?
Well, he is a freshman, and another thing, he's proven he can shoot, and he's not as wide open as he was earlier in the season. Teams are game planning around him. West Virginia, clearly Bob Huggins' script was, hey, don't come off of Brady Manick and don't come off Christian James. And if that means Trae Young gets around you, fine, but we're going to take our chances with Trae Young at the rim. So people not going to let Brady Manick just stand out there and shoot. Now, he's got a very quick shot. He can get a shot off pretty quickly, which means even when he's well covered, he can get that shot off. But he's just not as open as he was, say, in December or even early January.
Ryan, you mentioned the frustration he's having, particularly as it relates to road games. Do you think this is becoming a mental thing? I mean, I would think at some point it has to at least start to trend that way.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly got that impression chatting with him a little bit after that Texas game, that it's starting to wear on him, and he's really frustrated by it. Like Barry said, the way that teams have attacked him has been different. But in those situations, at times, he's still been able to hit shots at Lloyd Noble Center. Didn't really do it on Monday against West Virginia. But he's got to get through that and get it figured out. Yes, he's just a freshman. Yes, I think a lot of pressure is put on him. But at the same time, he's shown he's been able to do it to this point this year.
Barry, as we look at this Iowa State game coming up, I guess the other thing to remember is that even not great teams in the Big 12 can have some pretty good road environments. Does that start to factor into with Brady Manick and maybe more at large some of these road woes that the Sooners have had?
Well, it's tough to win on the road no matter what. We saw, early in the year, I think 8 of the first 9 Big 12 games, the road team won. But since then, we've had a return to normal where the home team has a pretty big advantage. It's tough to win at Hilton Coliseum, has been for almost 50 years. But this is not a vintage Iowa State team. They're in last place in the Big 12. This is a place the Sooners need to go up and win. Lon Kruger hasn't won up there in his Oklahoma time. But now's the time to get up there and get it done and get back on the winning track.
Ryan, is it as simple as Brady Manick getting going to win this Iowa State game, or do you put your finger on some other important things for the Sooners to do to win on Saturday?
Well, a couple other things that Oklahoma needs to do to be successful, not just Saturday, but really moving forward. Yes, Brady Manick needs to hit shots. I think getting Christian James back involved in a significant way in the offense after his recent illness, I think it would be big. But also getting Cam McGusty going again offensively, and he was really good for about a 6 or 7 game stretch in December and January, and then he's pretty well disappeared, virtually fallen out of their rotation. The other day they used Ty Lazenby in the second half. Lazenby has been primarily a first half guy, and McGusty would take over in the second half when they had to go to the bench at the guard spot. That wasn't the case on Monday. They need McGusty going, because when he's being aggressive, when he's hitting shots, when he's being the player he was last year for large stretches, their offense is so much better, especially when they've got some of those starters on the bench.
You know, Barry, I think about guys that we'll talk about Trae Young here in a sec. By the way, sorry, we're good. We've gotten
That's the first time somebody's brought up his name
well,
to this video.
Yeah, and I don't want people to think we've forgotten that Trae Young is part of this team. We'll get to him in a second, but you know, Ryan brings up Cam McGusty, Barry, and you know, you look at him. You look at another role player like Rashard Odoms. Odoms has shown some really positive signs. McGusty seems to be going the other way. I know Trae Young can do a lot, but having those supporting pieces is so key. He's gotten some help from one. Another guy, I'm a little surprised at the way McGusty has disappeared.
Well, when you look at the Oklahoma depth in general, it looked to be a team strength back in December, because a lot of guys coming off the bench that played big minutes last year. Christian Doolittle, Jordan Shepard, McGusty, McNeese. And really out of that group, only McNeese has really been a guy that you could count on most nights. And a guy like McGusty, it's a case of it's possible that he's playing about the same level he did last year. It was just when you're in last place or ninth, which is what Oklahoma was, there's not a lot of pressure. And if he scores 17 points and goes 6 for 17 from the field, nobody really cares. He's now not getting 17 shots. He's shooting close to what he did last year. He's just not getting that many shots. If they don't fall, you notice it because you're playing important games and top 25 games. And it's a case of they need him. He has not taken the step. He and Doolittle both have not taken the expected step from freshman to sophomore year. And until they do, that Oklahoma depth is going to not be as good as it needs to be.
Well, it's, you know, I think with Christian Doolittle, it's more of a case of sort of a lost year for him with that suspension, not coming up, not being able to play until late December. It's really never found a rhythm. I know he said he was in great physical shape coming back, but clearly there's a massive difference from what he was playing at and practicing at, because he couldn't be part of the team, couldn't practice, couldn't do those things either. It's sort of a lost year for him. I think now I did see some good signs from him on Monday, even though I think he was minus 13 while he was on the floor, was being a lot more aggressive on the offensive end, wasn't as hesitant to take shots and be forceful to the rim. I think those are good signs for Christian Doolittle. How much he's going to help them here over the next month or two, though, I'm not sure about.
I mentioned Rashard Odoms earlier, Ryan, and we saw Trae Young get forced off the ball or get taken off the ball, one of the two against West Virginia. We'll talk about that more in a second. But a guy that handled some of the ball handling duties was Rashard Odoms and did a fairly decent job. Is that something we could see more of?
I don't know how much we're going to see of it moving forward, just because of Trae Young is so good with the ball in his hands and such a big part of his game, and those assist numbers being, you know, what they are at a nation leading, I think it's 9.6 now after what happened the other night with just the one assist, are those long outlet passes and the really quick buckets that he can create. That's not going to be Rashard Odoms' game. He's just going to sort of put his head down and barrel through you, which he did with great effect the other night. I thought he was the only consistently strong ball handler for them when they had to go with Trae Young off the ball. And I think you might see it a little bit, like when they play a West Virginia, when they play a Kansas maybe with Devontae Graham. I think part of that played into Trae Young's health the other night. But it's at least something to have in your back pocket that this guy can do it, not turn the ball over, and can at least get you into the front court.
Barry, Trae Young not having the ball in his hands, Ryan and I talked about this earlier this week, but him not having the ball in his hands, while Odoms did a good job sort of stepping into that role, you can't replace that court vision that Trae Young has, his ability to initiate fast breaks or almost just create them on his own. They might have missed that as much as anything against West Virginia.
Yeah, and hopefully this Trae Young off the ball stuff goes away for a while, because you're playing West Virginia, so you're going to get a full assault from the press Virginia defense. So you don't want to wear out Trae Young. He was sick to some level. You had to worry about fatigue. But assuming that he's well, you're not playing West Virginia again until at least the Big 12 tournament. I'd like to see the ball back in Trae Young's hand full time, because the truth is this is not a strong ball handling team. Odoms and James, your other starting wings, not great ball handlers. Off the bench, Shepard's the guy that can do it pretty well, but outside of that, nobody else. The ball needs to be in Trae Young's hands. So I know the reasons, and they were valid for doing it against West Virginia, but the rest of the season, let's go back to ball dominant Trae Young.
You know, there was some question, Ryan, about, I mean, obviously his immediate health, flu, which I know you're going to be looking at the issue of the health as it relates to the flu, because this just in, basketball players are people too, and occasionally they get sick. But sort of the larger question of Trae Young and his durability, I mentioned Brady Manick being a true freshman. It's easy to forget that Trae Young is. You know, the kind of effort and level of basketball that he's playing at. Is there anything to just overall at where he is with his energy, and, you know, is he tired at all, do you feel like?
Well, I think that this week sort of helps him catch his breath a little bit with the Monday night game, so you get a couple days off. I know that Wednesday they just did film. They didn't get in and practice and was able to catch their breaths a little bit. I think that this week would help them. I know Lon Kruger talked about this during the Big 12 SEC Challenge week, that he wishes that SEC Challenge would move back to December just to give you an off day in the middle of conference play to recover a little bit. That isn't the case now. But I think we're not going to see a guy that's just going to get totally worn down. But at the same time, I think you're going to start seeing them try to give him a little breather, whether it's during games, during practices. I know was watching some games over the last couple of days, and I know like Bill Self gives Devontae Graham time off during the week where he isn't practicing because of the level of trust that he has in Devontae Graham. I'm not sure that Lon Kruger's going to do something like that, but I think they're going to look for ways to keep him fresher.
Barry, do you buy into any of the hitting the wall thing, especially with guys that are maybe going through a step up in level for the first time? Do you think that actually exists? I
think it exists for some players. I'm skeptical that it exists for players on Trae Young's level, because the truth is he's been playing round-the-calendar basketball for the last 10, 12 years. He's been a guy that's played high level apart from his high school season, you know, in the AAU circuit and the camp circuit. I think he's a little bit used to constant basketball against really good players. So I think it does. For somebody like Brady Manick, there could be a wall. For somebody like Trae Young, I really don't think so.
I feel like it's a little bit like I asked Lon Kruger about entrusting your offense to the degree that he did to a true freshman. I asked him about that earlier this year, and he said, you know, the way guys play now, you don't worry about it as much because they've done so much. I sort of think the same thing, although it is interesting. It'll be curious to see, you know, in say another year or two when he can maybe look back with some honesty. Did he have any physical barriers this freshman year at OU? We'll have to see. Guys, let's take a second before we get on out of here to talk about the Big 12 race, because it looked like Oklahoma State might have opened up a door for OU to get back into this thing legitimately by beating Kansas, and then Oklahoma goes right around Ryan and kind of, you know, blows the opportunity, I guess you could say. It looks like it's Kansas again winning this thing, but give us an idea of where you see OU falling as you look at the rest of the schedule, as you see what else is out there.
Well, I think they're in a little bit of a tough position with the rest of the schedule. I think Barry blogged about this earlier this week. Their schedule is pretty tough the remaining way. I mean, they've still got to go to Allen Fieldhouse. They still got to go to Lubbock, two of the toughest places to play in the league, against two of the best teams in the league. I think Kansas and Texas Tech, to me, are on a different level at this point than everybody else. Kansas is starting to play much more consistently. Texas Tech, their defense is fantastic, and Keenan Evans has the ability to take over games. I think for Oklahoma, they're still right in there at that 3, 4, 5 spot, which, you know, it's funny to look at now. That's better than where they were projected before the season. But you still, if you're an OU fan, I know you're disappointed that they're there given the way that the season started. But I still think they're going to be a team that's going to make that, you know, they're not going to fall into, say, a Wednesday game in the Big 12 tournament. Right. But they've got to start winning some games. We're talking about getting in danger of falling out even beyond Big 12, getting in danger of falling out of one of those spots to go to either Dallas or Wichita to start the NCAA tournament, which is so big for this team and their chances to advance past the first weekend. And they're going to have to start doing it. They're still in decent position now. Their resume, I think, is better than what a lot of people maybe the perception is because of these recent struggles, but they've got to turn it around.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned the road games that are left. Ames, obviously, as we've talked about, tough place to win. Lubbock, Lawrence, and then Waco is their other road game. Their home games remaining are Texas, K-State, Iowa State, 3 games that you would think they would be favored at least in at home. But Barry Ryan brings up a good point as it relates to the NCAA tournament, because right now, OU may not automatically slot into one of those close by geographic spots, but their non-conference resume gives them a chance. If they finish strong, they're probably still going to have a pretty close regional here.
Well, they still got a good chance for it, but Ryan's right. They need to finish strong, but they're a little bit helped by the fact that the teams around us, the teams in the southwestern plains part of the country, not a lot of people clamoring to get to Dallas or to Wichita.
Mm-hmm.
You got Tech and Kansas going to get 2 of the 4, but outside of that, who else is in line to go there? You got most of the teams. I can't think of another team in the 5-6 state region that would be ranked ahead of Oklahoma or seated ahead of Oklahoma. And so the Sooners still have a chance. Just finish pretty good, and they'll probably get there. But if you keep falling, if you go 9-9 in the Big 12, which if they lose their road games, that's what they're going to do. So
yeah.
you gotta take care of some business and finish strong, and then I think they'll end up in Dallas or Wichita.
Ryan, it feels like this game at Iowa State on Saturday is really important when you think about they got to turn right around Tuesday, go out to Lubbock, then have that rivalry game against Texas at home next weekend. But Iowa State being a team that's not great, feels like if you're going to get over that 9-9 potential hump, this is one of those games you kind of need to win if you're the Sooners.
Yeah, it really is. And Iowa State is a tough place to play. They haven't won here, since 2011, I think, was the last time that they won at Hilton Coliseum. It's an interesting atmosphere. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people there on Saturday in Ames, but this isn't the Fred Hoiberg teams. It isn't the Steve Prom teams of the first couple of years. There's no George Niang. There's no Naz Mitru Long on this team. Now Lindo Wigington is pretty good. He's got a chance to score in bunches, but they don't have that depth that Iowa State would run at you. But they're still really difficult to handle there. They've won some big time games at Hilton Coliseum even this season. So Oklahoma is going to have to play really well if they're going to win on Saturday afternoon.
All right, it's a 1 o'clock tip from Ames. It's an ESPN game. Also ESPN, that Tuesday night game out in Lubbock, that is a 6 o'clock start. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.